Hello again, and welcome back. We're ready to start our next panel, which is entitled "Banking on Talent: A Future-Ready Financial Services Workforce." So, could I please welcome on stage with me Alsallal, the Chief Executive of Madfooatcom, Boutros Klink, who is the Chief Executive for Standard Chartered Bank in the Middle East, Dima Najib-Costa, who is the co-head of People Experience for Middle East and Asia for JLL, and Sumaya Rehman, founder and the chief executive of High Street Resources. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. So far today, we've talked about a lot of change. We've talked about how the global payment system is being rewired, about the promise of crypto to change how all sorts of different financial services are delivered. We've talked about the sort of incredible promise of AI, but this panel is kind of about the constant in financial services, which is the people and the talent that drives it. But there as well, there's a lot of change because, of course, with all of these different transformations happening in finance, people who are working in it need new skills. So that's kind of what we're driving at today. Maybe Dima, I could start with you. What kind of new skills are needed in financial services today, and how has that changed recently, and how may it change in the near future?
So I think today we've spoken a lot about sort of digital literacy and sort of the accelerating pace of technology, right? And I think we've left out the elephant in the room in terms of people skills, right? Emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, the ability to solve complex problems, the ability to listen, right? So these are all skills we need to develop. And when we're looking at sort of, I would say we're talking about skill sets, but we're also talking about people, right? And the different profiles, I would say, especially in the finance and digital worlds that we're seeing. So we can look at the trading floor, for example, right? I read a quote recently that said the trading floor used to be a sort of high stakes chess game in a sort of locker room environment, right? So very, you've got that macho feel, you've got very loud sort of energy, and now you walk into a trading floor, it's very quiet, it's a very different atmosphere, and the energy is completely different. But it's also to do with the type of skill sets that are now needed for the role, right? And the type of work and the processes they're doing. So it's much more quieter, it's much more sort of siloed. A lot of it is more automated, electronic. So for me, it's very interesting just the type of people we're also looking to attract in sort of finance and banking industries.
And that's fascinating. And Ala, you've been working in sort of various different aspects of digitization. I think starting in web design for nearly 20 years. How have you seen the skills that are needed in your field change?
Well, the demand for new skills and the skills needed for the new technologies that we see every year is a continuous trend that we see in the market. So when we look at finding such kind of talent, we figured out that the best thing is to hire people who are willing to learn, who are fast learners, who are motivated to jump into new technologies. And that's how we find success in finding talented people. Because today, like AI is booming since, as we saw also in the session in the morning, since last year. You cannot just move into AI if you don't have the talent, which is you don't have by now. If you don't have people who are fast adapting to new technologies or who can have a strong base to change and to adapt with new technologies. Um, and we do not limit ourselves with the industry. So, given that we are in the financial industry, we don't look at always headhunting people from financial industry services. We tried headhunting people from different industries, diversity and inclusion for such industry can show us great results in the field. We saw it, and that's what we like about fintech or financial services in general, that mixing between different industries, getting them into the financial industry, educating them about it, can show you wonders and can help you to scale.
That's really interesting. Sumaya, I know this is something you think about quite deeply as well in terms of how companies are looking to a much broader range of maybe industries, backgrounds. How do you see financial services firms kind of adapting to the challenges of adapting their workforce?
I think it really depends on the kind of financial services company we're talking about. First, you have traditional finance, and I know there's quite a few people from traditional finance here, but then at the same time, there are fintechs that are a hybrid, and there are crypto companies and so on. And I mean, we had CZ here today. So I think it really depends on which specific financial firm you're talking about because the skill set required in each are quite different. And I think what's happening at the moment is that everyone's really trying to innovate where they get talent from and how they get it. Traditional finance in previous years used to recruit from, they really wanted people with financial skills and all of that. But more and more, they're going more towards people out of the box. So they're hiring a lot of engineers. They're hiring, people with doctorates in medicine and so on, and then bringing them on board and teaching them finance. Because finance isn't rocket science at the end of the day, but rocket science is rocket science. So they're, kind of moving away from just traditional financial degrees. But then, like Ala also mentioned, it's very difficult to find someone with all these new technologies in the talent force. And what is really important is for these companies, these big companies that are quite influential, to work with universities to develop and alter the coursework such that they're able to, have talent that is ready to get into the workforce. So I'm sure AI, et cetera, is being taught at universities now because it's become a big thing. But mostly people are learning off the internet, doing self-learning, doing, learning from peers and so on. So I think there is really a little bit of a gap there where they can kind of cater to that.
It's like taking the divide that Dima very sort of put very well, the chess game with the locker room atmosphere, and taking those two cultures and fragmenting them even into even more, isn't it? Boutros, running Standard Chartered's Middle Eastern operations, you must have to think an awful lot about kind of what makeup of team is actually going to work best here, because we're talking about so many different personality types, backgrounds, skill sets. How do you find the challenges of balancing that many very, very different groups of people to sort of make an organization that works, that needs to do all the different things it does, but also actually is cohesive?
No, thanks, Josh, and good afternoon, everyone. Absolutely delighted to, to be on this panel. The finance world is transforming as we speak, and we're seeing, obviously, everybody's talking about more administrative jobs basically, being replaced by artificial intelligence, computers, technologies. Nevertheless, we're seeing tremendous amounts of opportunities that are coming up as well. And some of the jobs are client service. People want to talk to people. We every time you try to get on an automated phone service, everybody ends up very frustrated. To some of the technologies that we saw a little bit earlier on the panels now, and you need the expertise, you need to lure in people with certain skill sets that maybe your existing staff does not have. But more importantly, how do you take your existing staff and people who have served you for 20, 30 years and move them along this transformation? And that is quite tough. Plus, you have the younger generations, the people who are entering the workforce right now, and their expectations of what a job is very different than the people who have gone through the last, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years of work within a financial institution. Now, bringing everybody together is absolutely, it's difficult. And the more senior you are, the more time you have to spend on HR issues, the more time you have to spend on recruiting the right people. And very important to build a proper culture within the organization that one sets the tone in terms of how we are advancing, and try to find the people who with the right fit for an organization. People can be exceptional, but they may not be the right fit for certain types of organizations. So this diversity also is very, very critical because it adds tremendous value. And being part of an international organization, while localization requirements are important, we also try to ensure that we are bringing expat diverse talents. It can be gender, it can be nationality, it can be people from different parts of the organization. And things are changing. Things are changing, and we are expected to do different jobs during a career. Well, probably my parents did one job with one company. I did one job with multiple companies. The next generation is going to do multiple jobs within a company or across multiple companies. So the world is fantastic. It's exciting. And the skill sets, which we will talk about over the coming minutes, are different and changing.
I was intrigued by one of your points there, because it's one that a lot of, well, basically every bank is having to grapple with quite a lot, which is the very different kind of expectations and kind of wishes of the next generation of talent. You know, people who have grown up, perhaps been at university during pretty much worldwide lockdowns and are entering the workforce with very different ideas about what that means. What do you find the biggest challenges for getting new talent in and getting it to mesh with the organization are?
I think the organization has to adapt to the younger generation. This is a generation that have grown with the phones, with the various social media. They're very impatient. They want to see their careers accelerate quite rapidly. If the organization is not following suit and making sure that we are accelerating their progress within their organization and giving them the challenges, the experiences in a broad range of areas, they will leave you. And we find that the best talent are the people we groom in from the beginning, because suddenly we instill in them the culture of the organization, what we stand for. And that is a lot easier than people who are passers-by, who will come in, do a 1 year or 2 years, move on. So we are thinking quite a bit about how do we adapt to this new generation, whether it's through our employees, but also our clients. Because as institutions, we've been banking people who are aging. And if we look at traditional banks, their client base is also aging. Right? And the more hybrid virtual ELAs of the world are attracting the younger generation. They say, Boutros, if I need to open an account with you, it takes me forever. Whereas there it is done instantaneously. And while we're trying to catch up, we're not as agile, we're not as fast. So we need to figure out what we need to do and partner up, which were discussions that have happened earlier on, but also complement what is happening right now. Complement the new fintechs, the new entrants to the market, and the competition is fierce. I have competition in the telecom industry, I have competition in the fintech industry, I have competition in the retail industry. So a challenging landscape.
That sort of brings us on to a point that you've all touched on in different ways, which is not just that there are new skills needed within today's financial workforce, but also they're changing very quickly. So it's not simply the challenge of recruiting or training another generation of people who can do new things. it's keeping them dynamic. It's keeping, a lot of people talk about closing the digital talent gap, but it's also about kind of keeping it closed once new areas open up. Sumaya, how do you see firms responding to that? It's almost this need for kind of continuous training and refreshing of their kind of workforce.
No, I think that is a big challenge that everyone is facing. A way to kind of mitigate that is really initially the kind of talent that you end up hiring, right? Organizations need to look at rangy talent. At Goldman, we used to love the word rangy because you hire them from school and you hire talent that is very entrepreneurial, critical thinking, and is able to range from one thing to another quite quickly. And so you bring them in, you train them in a certain thing, but these guys are intellectually curious and they want to kind of tap into the next best thing and learn the next best thing. And so your L&D function, etc., can only do so much. These are people that are inherently curious and will go out there and acquire new skills intentionally so that they're able to kind of keep up with the times and so on. And like you mentioned, this new generation they're technology natives, right? So they are very on top of the game and they want to learn new things and so on. So I think one of the big things is really the kind of talent you hire. Make sure that they are rangy and they're flexible and they want to kind of learn more, intellectually curious.
Absolutely. And Dima, what do you think are the main ways that firms can, well, both firms and individuals can adapt this sort of rapid evolution of the skills that are needed, not just a one-off change but continuous?
I think there's a couple of things that were coming to mind while everyone was talking, which is a lot of organizations are rolling out tech, right? And we work with a lot of organizations where we look at etiquette training in that if I can't get a hold of you, I'm going to use Teams, I'm going to message you, I'm going to call you, I'm going to email you, right? So etiquette training in terms of what communication platform is the best for the message I need to give. And in terms of, it could be, for example, emails are a day, 2 days to respond. A message is something I need within the day. A phone call is now, right? But you cannot use all these platforms. So what we're finding is people are shying away from the technology because there's an overabundance of technology, right? So a simplification of what's available. You don't need to have everything. You need to have a system and a process that works. And that people know what's the correct training for using each platform. I think with a lot of the rollouts, there isn't the correct change management, there isn't the correct refresh, right? So that's one thing. And I think, talking about sort of the younger generation, what we're seeing as well is they want transparency, they want autonomy, and that means a number of things, right? That means health and well-being benefits, for example. They want to know what you're spending. It's not I'm spending X amount and that's what's important. It's they want to have that sort of adult conversation. This is what the company is spending on me, and I have that flexibility to decide for myself what benefits I want, right? So this is what we're advising, and that you can't have all the health and well-being, and people are at different life stages, different areas in their life. So just have that honest conversation with your employees. Say you have X amount to spend, and there's lots of companies that are helping organizations do this in terms of this is how much I have and this is what I can spend for my personal development, my learning and development, So that's what I would advise. Yeah.
It's funny hearing you talk about how you can't just sort of send email and Slack and Teams and ring somebody at once. I almost want to set you up with a conversation with my editor. Maybe you could have a chat with him.
Just sorry if I may add a comment here. What we find, we run surveys for our people on an annual basis, right? And what are they looking for? They're looking for growth opportunities, they're looking for learning opportunities, they're looking for being able to connect with the network of the organization as well. And this is a challenge, whether it's the sponsorships, the mentorships, the reverse mentoring that we do sometimes for our leaders. the world is changing very rapidly, and what they're doing right now is not going to help them probably a few years down the road. So problem solving, what you discussed, is critical. We want people who are curious, who are identifying the problems, who are bringing the necessary people among the organization, putting them together to come up with the solutions. So those are the skill sets we're looking for that are transferable, and some of it will go over time, and it's not something specific knowledge about a particular system or about a process, etc.
That's fascinating. So you're saying you're looking for the people for whom this continuous learning and relearning and adapting is actually a plus rather than a minus, right? You're looking for the people who want to do that, who don't view it as a sort of negative for their career. That's fascinating. Ala, what do you think, or not what do firms need to do? What do you think about most when you're thinking about recruiting the next generation of talent?
So I like to hire or to find people who have a passion, who can learn fast, who can innovate, who can be proactive in the organization, not reactive people. That's where, like, if you look at the skill set, it's similar to how you see an entrepreneur in front of you. That's the spirit that I try my best to focus on, and that's where I encourage my team to come up with ideas, try them inside the company. I support entrepreneurs in residence concept where if someone has an idea, we can incubate it, then we can help him to scale it, and then that sets an example to the rest of the team. Because you don't want to end up just increasing your salary by aging. That's a concept that also I don't encourage in the fintech industry, and we don't have it. So you get promoted with the achievements, with the new ideas, with the new changes that you do in the company, but not with the routine that you have in your day-to-day business. And that's challenging, because when you look at the banking industry, when I try to hire ex-bankers, that's a challenge I see or I face most of the time. So when they go through the interview process and most of their life is full of processes and procedures, I see a little room for innovation in most of the caliber I interview. I end up most of the time hiring from other industries, not from the banking industry. That's very critical, and that's something we need to address for the banking industry because it's not here for long. Bill Gates says banking is necessary, banks are not. So we know that this is something may happen with fintech, with the development, with the new tech, with AI, with the challenger banks. All banks may disappear. So should we face the reality today or in future? And that, when you think about it, it applies how you look at resources, at talented people, at your team today. Do you want to see how they just get rid of from the bank, or do you want to help them to develop and earn new skills that can help them to move inside the industry?
That's very interesting and kind of brings us on to our next topic, which is, we've been talking a lot about individuals and their sort of development plans. What do you think, perhaps Sumaya, I can come to you. What do you think the strategies that financial services firms themselves should be using to attract the talent profile we've just been describing?
So I think it's been kind of evolving over time. I used to manage campus recruiting for my previous firms, and basically what's been happening is traditional finance has really been struggling and losing out on the top cream of talent at the top universities and the smartest people across the world to fintechs, to startups, to all these other companies that we've been talking to and about at the moment. And I think the fight for talent really is to try and attract all these people. So what they're trying to do is educate students that are leaving the workforce into, what does your future look like if you kind of go into a certain stream, right? So what banks and the larger organizations that are influential are doing is that they're working with these universities with not only final graduating students, but first year students, second year students, and really kind of emerging onto the campuses earlier on so that they're able to kind of educate the students what their future looks like. And I think we were talking about, the talent in the technical side of things, which is tech, engineering, and so on. And when we look at diversity in that space, it is so, there are very few women that actually choose that path. And, when organizations are larger, they're like, okay, we need to increase our diversity in the workforce, but how do you do that when there isn't actually talent in the workforce? And why isn't there talent? Because students, not enough students, female students are studying these technical fields. So you kind of go to the root of the problem and you educate and try and bring in more of these diverse individuals into the studying fields of these courses. And how do you do that? You bring women that are leading tech within the world, go and bring them onto universities, campuses, and help them kind of talk to them about what their future could look like if they study all of that. So I feel like, whether it's a large organization or smaller organizations or startups, they need to go onto campuses and really kind of educate not only the students, but also the faculty into what they should be teaching, right? So that when these people are graduating, when these students are graduating, they're fully aware of what their options are, and they're able to kind of tap onto the ones that they really want and stay there instead of like hopping around.
It's sort of like the solutions, what you're saying is are a lot further upstream maybe
Yes.
than you might immediately think of. It's far too late by the time you're looking at the graduate pool because
If
you're
you look at the pool and you're like, okay, my firm's target is that in the next 5 years, we're going to have 50% diversity in gender. How can you do that when the 50% talent doesn't, if you look at the entire talent pool and is 80-20, how are you going to manage that, right? So those are kind of like the tools that firms are actually using and doing at the moment.
Dima, you also think about sort of how firms can kind of angle themselves to recruit from a much more diverse pool. What are the strategies you see as being successful?
So we've mentioned different ways of thinking. I think we also need to widen the talent pool a little bit and think about divergent ways of thinking. So people who are neurodivergent, 1 in 7 people. And neurodiversity is individuals who are autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxia, and the list goes on. Why it's interesting is they sit at the intersectionality of it all, right? So if you walk into a room, you can immediately identify how many women are in the room, how many people of color, if someone has a physical disability. Neurodiversity sort of sits, is a hidden sort of, it's for the person to disclose, right? But what we've seen is neurodivergents have the skill sets that a lot of banks and sort of the digital space and the sort of tech companies want. So we've seen a rise of neurodiversity programs. We're still very early on in terms of how to welcome and make people feel comfortable and have the right sort of training. But we've already started and it's really exciting, but it's also one thing to consider, right? We talk about talent quite a lot. There is a wide talent pool with these skill sets already. It's just about how do we roll them in? How do we set it up so that from the moment they apply, it's a fair ground for them, right?
And it's quite a big challenge, right? Because there is maybe more so in maybe more so in kind of big tech and quant trading and kind of code heavy operations. It already feels like there's an image that these are more welcoming places than maybe traditional financial services for people who might be neurodivergent. So it's almost like a lot of types of firms have gotten a head start on what you're describing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, a lot of individuals just don't disclose they are, right? So they're already in these industries and they're thriving, but they could do better, right? So we talk about upskilling. If we make the environment comfortable, change the processes a little bit. It's always tweaks to the benefit of everyone, but it definitely gives them a better advantage.
I'm very glad you said upskilling, because that's the last thing I wanted to come on to before the timer kicks us off, which is, we've talked an awful lot here about recruitment and the next generation. Obviously, all big organizations have the existing generations there who have a lot of experience and institutional memory, and sort of general value to the firm that you certainly don't want to lose, but equally are less likely to have got the sort of digital nativism that the next generations have. What broad things should big institutions be doing to upskill their workforces, and where are the biggest challenges there? Whoever would like to answer for this one.
We're doing a lot, right, in terms of this space, and especially in terms of trying to mold the leaders of tomorrow. So, we look at it from two perspectives. First perspective is the skill set and the ability of the individual, the ability to grow, the ability to collaborate, the ability to execute, which is very important, and then the ability to lead. And then the other side of that is the aspiration of the individual. I mean, where do they want to be? Are they comfortable with the status quo? Do they want to move quickly? And you really need this energy within the individuals to see the organization as a whole and the individual move quite a bit. I want to touch upon one thing that was not mentioned as part of the panel, and this is more and more we're finding people wanting to join organizations that have purposes, especially when it pertains to whether it's the ESG, whether it's climate change, whether it's financial inclusivity, whether it's that. People believe that organizations have to play an instrumental role in the communities. And the new generation is keen to join organizations that actually commit to those areas and actually prove that they are doing something in that direction. And more and more so, this is becoming a predominant theme.
I'm afraid that's about all we have time for. So all that's left is to thank you so much for joining me up here and for your fascinating contributions to what's a really important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.